Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1032 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. But actually, before we begin, I want to remind you guys of Revujo's shop. Link will be in the description as well as pinned in the comments. If you guys want a print of the artwork that we're speedrunning through in the video, go check out that link. It's awesome. But anyway, this chapter, I really feel like we're at a kind of inflection point for a running debate that we've been having about how this arc is structured, or sort of the course of events. So this chapter, I think more than any other, really substantiates that Onigashima is sort of following the pre-time skip model of major arcs. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at Alabasta, if you look at Skypiea, Enies Lobby, Thriller Bark, there's a sort of template, general template that the arcs follow. Like, for instance, the Straw Hats that are in the arcs get their 1 vs 1 fights, and they're almost kind of checked off the list sequentially. We go through them while there is some sort of impending disaster. In Alabasta, you had a bomb. In Skypiea, you had Enel destroying the Sky Islands. In Enies Lobby, you had the Buster Call. And in Thriller Bark, you had daytime plus the threat of an enemy after you had defeated the main antagonist, the Shichibukai. But Oda sort of goes down the list of the individual fights that these strats are supposed to have in each arc, and then it pans back to Luffy versus the main boss. And in all these arcs, following this general structure, you kind of get a sense of what happens. Basically, the strats win their individual fights, the threat, whatever it is dealt with, they survive it, and then Luffy defeats his opponent. This is, I think, what would generally be considered a normal One Piece arc. Maybe this would make more sense if I compare Enies Lobby to what is currently taking place in Onigashima, because right now we're following the structure of Enies Lobby pretty much a beat for beat. So if you guys recall, upon arriving in Enies Lobby, it was sort of hurried to get to the main building where all the Straw Hats were lined up, and Robin had her moment of I want to live. Well, the I want to live moment was a hype moment for the Straw Hat crew where they sort of flex and they're like, yes, we're here to take down the enemy that no one thinks that we're going to defeat. Well, in Onigashima, at the very beginning, before we got into all the individual fights, that's essentially what happened. Luffy had his moment of, I'm here, I'm gonna flex, and I'm gonna defeat this opponent, Kaido, that nobody thinks I'm gonna defeat. This was around chapter 1000. So then the next part of Enies Lobby focused on the individual fights of the strats sequentially, checked off the list, which is, again, essentially what we've had in Onigashima. Most of the strats here have had their chapter, their individual fights. In Enies Lobby, those fights concluded with Sanji and Zoro, who both defeated their opponents by revealing new techniques. This appears to be what we're going to have with Zoro and with Sanji. Sanji's likely going to use his Germa upgrade in order to defeat Queen. That seems what's going to be what's happening. And in this chapter, we can see that it's suggested that probably Zoro's going to defeat King by using Enma power-up. Going back to Enies Lobby, after the Strats won their individual fights against members of Cypherpole, they needed to escape the building which was being destroyed and slowly flooding. And so Oda introduced a surprising way to get the Strats out of this danger, which was Mermaid Kokoro. Well, in Onigashima, similarity with the flooding in Enies Lobby is the fire. It serves the same function of maintaining tension for the members of the Strat crew that have won their battles. Some sort of thing of nature that they need to run from, which is presented as a danger and I suppose is going to be avoided somehow, probably in a surprising way. Meanwhile, in Enies Lobby, you have the threat of the Buster Call, which is essentially, at the time, right, it leaves you with the impression or the thought that if Luffy manages to defeat Lucci, how are they going to escape? Even if they win, they still lose. You've got two things in Onigashima playing this role simultaneously. First off, is the island going to explode or is it going to fall? And or the threat of enemies appearing after the battle concludes. This is sort of a combination of the threats that were present in Alabasta, Literal Bomb, and Thriller Bark, an enemy that appears after you've won. And also, just like Thriller Bark, you have a hint that we're going to have another nothing happened moment. But anyway, back to Eni's lobby. With the Buster Call coming, Oda needed a clever way to get the strats out of danger, which happened to be the Mary showing up. And so we can presume that likely the same thing is going to happen in Onigashima. They're going to prevent the bomb from going off and escape from the enemies somehow that are threatened to show up. But before this, after all the strats have won their battles and escaped from danger, you pan back to Luffy versus the main opponent, Lucci. A fight nobody believed that he could win, that he had already lost earlier. So following this template, then Luffy defeats Kaido. And maybe you can even speculate that the other strats will see Luffy fighting Kaido and cheer him on, just like Eni's lobby. So I hope I explained this well enough. Do you guys see how the structure of Eni's lobby and what we currently have in Onigashima is at the very least very, very similar? I chose Eni's lobby because there's slight variations between all the pre-time skip major arcs, and that's the one that is probably closest to what we have going on here, but there's elements of all of them, all of the major pre-time skip arcs, the battles in Onigashima, such that Onigashima is kind of a combination of all of them in different ways. And so I would say that when reading this chapter, my main takeaway from it is that it appears as though Oda is setting the expectation that this is going to be a pre-time skip arc, structured like a pre-time skip battle. Sanji's probably going to defeat Queen, Zoro's probably going to defeat King, unlocking some sort of new ability. We're going to go through the rest of the fights sequentially. Likely Raizo's going to defeat Fukurokuju. We have Orochi sort of returning and Hiyori in the chapter. Doesn't seem likely that Orochi is going to win, right? So then Orochi loses. Cypherpole is kind of acting like Kuma did in Thriller Bark. It doesn't appear likely that X-Drake and Appu are going to be able to defeat them. That's not my expectation at the very least. So we're probably going to get some sort of conversation between them that's going to be very illuminating about things going on around the world, but then Cypherpole is going to win and then be that threat or be a part of that threat after you have won. Yamato is probably going to save Onigashima from exploding, while Momonosuke is probably going to save the island from falling. The Straw Hats will deal with the fire somehow. And then you're left with the boss battles, in this case, Law and Kid versus Big Mom, and Luffy versus Kaido. And so following the general template, they win. Like, do you guys see how this is the current expectation as we're following the events that are currently taking place? Is this not everything that I've sort of said here, not what most people anticipate, or at least what the story is kind of priming us to anticipate? I say this often, guys, but you've got to be very wary of the expectation that Oda wants you to have, because this is the expectation that Oda wants you to have. A lot of people, myself included, aren't really excited about this arc being a pre-time skip arc, mainly because we've been there before. We've gone through multiple arcs in which this is what happens. And I think the expectation for Wano and Onigashima has been from the very start higher than that. The best arcs ever in One Piece are the ones that break the pattern. The best moments are created from breaking the pattern. Oda's always been very good about breaking the pattern in very targeted ways in order to create the best emotional moments. Like, an example of this is in Alabasta. At that point in the story, we're expecting, right, that these Straw Hats are gaining allies in every arc. Oda knows that. He knows that, hey, somebody is present for the arc, and then they join the crew afterwards. And so he breaks the pattern in a very targeted way. The person that you thought was going to join the crew didn't, and instead a villain, Robin, joined. Breaking the pattern. Very strong moment. Another very established, strong pattern in the pre-time skip, and even now, really, is that a Straw Hat, a Nakama, does not die. So you begin with Water 7 and Eni's lobby, just pretty much presuming Oda is trying to make us believe that the Mary will be saved. Some way, somehow, it will happen. I don't think that too many people had the expectation, right, that the Mary was just gonna die. So when it happens, it breaks the pattern. It's a very strong moment. And Oda is very good about getting the most out of it. Kuma is another example of this. We go through all of these pre-time skip arcs, and the established pattern is you kind of have one person that you're dealing with, and then after you deal with them, you get to rest, and then party, right? And so Oda introduces Kuma in Thriller Bark as a threat after the arc is over, which was new. It breaks the pattern, leads to a very strong moment. Sabaody and Ace, I think that you can pretty obviously see, is a play off of our expectations based on the patterns in the story. You don't expect those moments, you don't expect the Straw Hats to lose and get separated, and you don't expect Luffy not to save his brother because Oda has set up that expectation from a very long story. And when he breaks it, powerful moment. So I'm just telling you, even though this may seem familiar, like we're walking down the same pathway of pre-time skip major arc battles, prepare yourself for the possibility that Oda twists it in a very powerful and significant way. Maybe not only after the battle, but during it. He's literally made a living doing this. But of course the question is how is he going to twist it, and which ways? And so I see a lot of people being antsy about this, impatient, right? Because they feel this sense of normalness, of familiarity, and it's not satisfying to them. And I'm just here to tell you guys that, in my personal opinion, Oda's going to twist it in a lot of ways. That is my gut feeling. We've obviously used those examples of the pre-time skip, right? How, it all followed the same pattern, and Oda pretty much twisted, like, outside of the veneer of it, twisted one essential thing, leading to one incredible powerful moment at the end of the arc usually. But a concept we haven't talked about in a really long time is that the entire post-time skip has been a very exaggerated what if of the pre-time skip. And I really think that this theory helps establish and argue for the likelihood that we're in for a wild and crazy rest of Onigashima. And that this chapter is almost kind of designed to lull us to sleep a little bit. This theory goes by many names through the Looking Glass, the parallels between the pre and post time skip, but it's very apparent how Oda sort of structures these things, and it's in a very organized way. The example which I always feel like illustrates this best is Alabasta versus Dressrosa. Alabasta is about the Straw Hats coming to save an island before a Shishibukai establishes control and oust the pre-existing good government that is being blamed for wrongs that they did not commit. Dressrosa is like a what-if of this, where the Straw Hats instead come to an island after a Shishibukai has already accomplished this. Oda takes the same sort of idea and changes the focus in a very significant way, which creates a different experience. Fishman Island versus Arlong Park is very obvious in this respect, where Arlong Park was about the fishmen abusing and oppressing the humans. Well, Fishman Island is about fishmen abusing and oppressing fishmen and reverses the conflict regarding humans. Oda takes his idea from the pre-time skip, he escalates it, the stakes rise, and then it becomes an endgame problem. Whole Cake Island is another really good example of this. The structure of Whole Cake Island is very similar to the structure of Impel Down. You go into Impel Down looking for Ace, and it's really a battle that the Straw Hats aren't prepared for, and they barely manage to escape. I said they, but of course an Impel Down is just Luffy, but you get it. Well, Whole Cake Island is the same idea. You go into Whole Cake Island looking for someone. In this case, it's twisted, right? Because Luffy actually finds and retrieves Sanji, but it's also escalated because your enemies follow you from Whole Cake Island, where they didn't follow you after Impel Down. Like, when you really dig into Whole Cake Island, you get a great sense of how Oda is twisting a lot of things. Taking an idea from the pre-time skip, using it again, and twisting it constantly. There's a lot of similarity between Bon Clay at the end of Impel Down and Jinbei and the Vinsmoke at the end of Whole Cake Island. The twist, though, is that Bon Clay didn't get to escape Impel Down, but here we have Jinbei returning in Whole Cake Island. There's also significant parallels between Sanji's story in the Baratie and Sanji's story in Whole Cake Island. The themes were very similar about feeding your enemies and the pressure that Sanji has to protect Zeph's dreams and his life. In the Baratie, Sanji was not punished for feeding his enemies. He fed Gin and he fed Don Krieg, but at the conclusion of the arc, Don Krieg was defeated and Gin became an ally. However, Sanji fed his enemies in Whole Cake Island, Big Mom, and now she is chasing after them, where she continues to be a threat now. Sanji much more so is being punished for feeding his enemies. And I think by the time that Big Mom's story concludes, Oda's going to escalate the conflict of the Baratie, some of those themes, to reach even more powerful moments. Sanji and Whole Cake Island is also a parallel of both Robin and Usopp from Water 7 and Enies Lobby. It's a combination of both of them wrapped together. Sanji, just like Robin, believes himself to be a burden to the Straw Hat crew. Sanji, just like Usopp, is leaving the Straw Hat crew in order to protect somebody specific that is not really considered to be a crew member. Sanji has his kind of I want to live moment, and at the same time almost has to beg to return. Also like Usopp, he fights his captain. Also like Robin, he needs to be rescued. Also like Usopp, he lies about who he is. Also like Robin, he has secrets about his past that he didn't want to reveal. As I said, small moments like this are just scattered throughout the post-time skip, where you can very clearly see a parallel to the pre-time skip, but it's escalated, changed, what-if'd in some sort of significant way. Another great example of this is Smoker versus Fujitora in Dressrosa and Alabasta. In Alabasta, Smoker meets Luffy in a bar. In Dressrosa, Luffy meets Fujitora in a bar. Smoker ends up fighting with the Straw Hats after being in a cage, bird cage in Dressrosa, and traps both Fujitora and the Straw Hats. But ultimately, both Fujitora and Smoker are apprehensive about involving themselves in a fight because the Shichibukai is a world government system. And at the conclusion of the arc, the Straw Hats' feats are manipulated by the world government and given to the Marines, so that Smoker gets credit for everything that the Straw Hats accomplished in Alabasta. The government tried the same thing in Dressrosa. It's twisted in a significant and meaningful way where Fujitora rejects this and reveals the truth to the world. In Alabasta, you lose a Shichibukai. In Dressrosa, you lose the Shichibukai system. Buggy and Caesar Clown, both being clowns, are parallels of each other. Caesar Clown is the escalation. Big Mom's powers are an escalation of Moria's powers. The concept of the Grand Fleet in Dressrosa is a subversion of expectation, built up from a lot of the arcs in the pre-time skip where you had allies that were very specific to those particular arcs but then never joined the crew. In Dressrosa, obviously, the various allies that these Straw Hats were fighting with ended up joining the crew sort of in a capacity, an escalation. I could go on for a lot longer, so on and so forth. But with this in mind, then you can start looking at the various concepts that are taking place in Onigashima now that are paralleled with events in the pre-time skip and wonder, how is this a twist? How can Oda twist or escalate this? Because that's consistently what he's done in the post-time skip. I've already established, right, that there's a lot of similarities between Enies Lobby and Onigashima right now. But the whole concept of Enies Lobby was that we went there to go rescue Robin. Well, now Oda's introduced the idea that, hey, people are trying to get Robin, so she's currently safe. But everybody wants her. He, of course, wants you to believe that, of course, they're going to protect Robin, because Luffy, you know, that's just what's going to happen. That's everybody's expectation. Always be wary of the expectation that Oda wants you to have. So a very natural escalation or twist is at the conclusion of this arc, rather than save Robin, you lose Robin, right? We've also speculated that it seems likely that Oda is setting up a Big Mom Rage. Well, Big Mom's Rage is conceptually very similar to Chopper's Monster Point in Enies Lobby. If you guys remember, Chopper's Monster Point was defeated in Enies Lobby by being thrown into the sea, which is a concept that many people are familiar with Big Mom. It's either happened or been threatened multiple times already. When watching Enies Lobby for the first time, a feeling that I had, right, a question as the events are unfolding is, wait, are the Straw Hats going to have to fight Chopper? But in reality, there was no real consequences for Chopper going completely crazy, right? Chopper didn't defeat members of the Straw Hats or didn't really pan out to be a threat to them at all. Monster Point Chopper defeated their enemies and then was thrown into the sea. Well, a natural twist of this concept is that Monster Point Big Mom becomes a danger to the Straw Hats, potentially even defeats Straw Hats, like Monster Point didn't. A concept or idea from the pre-time skip paralleled in the post-time skip, twisted or escalated. So again, obviously you don't know what will be twisted or not, but the common thing at the pre-time skip is that you have this threat, right? The bomb going off in Alabasta, and they're saved from it. So potentially a natural twist escalation of this is that the bomb actually goes off. Just throwing that out there. You assume that Zoro and Sanji are gonna defeat Queen and King, right? That's the expectation everybody has right now. Well, maybe they don't. We've already compared Enies Lobby and Onigashima a lot, but one thing that was true in Enies Lobby is that when Sanji and Zoro showcased the powers that they needed to defeat their opponents, it wasn't heavily foreshadowed. It wasn't something that people expected before we got it, which improved the hypeness of that moment. But now we have, like, Oda has teased the things that we are supposed to assume is going to help them win. So it's different. It leaves you with a different feeling. It personally makes me wonder. You guys see what I'm saying? I'm not saying that these are the things that are actually going to happen, but because I keep this in mind, it keeps me sort of still guessing as to what Oda is actually going to do. But anyway, guys, I really hope this wasn't information overload. I know we went on for 20 minutes here, but it's one of those things where it's like, how much do you need to explain in order so that people understand? But again, guys, just to reiterate, the reason that I'm bringing all this stuff up, it's not for no reason. It's because the main takeaway, the main feeling that I have after this chapter is, okay, we pretty much know what the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 chapters are going to be. We're following the standardness of pre-time skip arcs. I think some people need this kind of information to feel as though they don't know what's going to happen. I've seen other YouTubers such as Morge begin to get antsy that this arc is going to be special or interesting or live up to their expectations, and they're beginning to go negative because it feels standard. So once again, I remind everyone to be patient and enjoy the ride. Yes, it could be true that Zoro defeats King and Sanji defeats Queen like we expect, and the bomb is saved, and all these things do go according to plan. Or maybe it doesn't. If you think you know, you don't know. Even if you end up being right. It's coming. I feel it. But anyway, let's talk more specifically about the actual chapter. So we start off with a weird scene, almost, with Marco and with Izo. It reminds us that the fire is actually presented to be a threat. Now, is it actually going to kill anybody? No. Like the flood in Enies Lobby, we already talked about that. But, you know, Oda is constantly reminding us that the fire is doing something. And it's leading everyone to one space, which is eventually going to play a role. What that is, I don't know. What I do find interesting, though, is in the last chapter, right, we had Big Mom showing signs of maybe beginning to rage. Everyone's being funneled to the same area, where Big Mom is. So if Big Mom does actually rage, and, I mean, she could take thousands of lives by herself. Or even without raging, right? We know how her devil fruit powers work. She took dozens of people's lives at the same time already. That could be a Big Mom power-up. Gruesome power-up. That's my only real thought right now. As well as you guys know that I think it's possible that the bomb actually goes off. People are going to say I'm crazy about that. I may be. But if the bomb actually does go off, everybody being in one location could matter. For instance, to protect them. I think about someone like Law's abilities. I don't know what he would do, but those are the things that come to mind. We then have a scene with Yamato, X-Drake, Apu, Brook, Robin, CP0, and the Flame Yokai. I really don't have too much to say about this other than, I mean, the Flame Yokai, how do you stop that? How do you stop that from setting the explosion off? It's clear that Yamato has some kind of plan because at the end, she talks to Fuga, who's a friendly number, which is interesting in and of itself. So, you know, she says, hey, I need your help. So she has an idea. But to me, just looking at the Flame Yokai, I mean, it seems like something that can't even be attacked, so I have no idea. I suppose the safe assumption, right, is that you have a fire yokai and Yamato has displayed ice abilities, so if she freezes it, it could potentially die or freezes the explosives so that they don't get set off. I don't know how satisfying that would be, but that's probably like the safe assumption. So I guess my guess at surface level is that she's going to use Fuga to crash through the floor and get to the basement faster because the Flame Yokai can literally pass through the floors and walls, and then she's planning on freezing it. Again, because my idea is so specific here, I hope that something different happens, but that makes sense to me. But anyway, in the last couple chapters, Odo's kind of setting up a CP0 versus Brook and Robin fight, I guess. But he didn't go with that, and instead have X-Drake and Apu fighting CP0. I think that a lot of people are probably wondering, what's the point, right? Like, Apu and X-Drake are probably not going to defeat CP0. Yes, we're going to get some exposition about something most likely, but like, what's the main reason why Oda is setting this up? First off, X-Drake versus CP0. Sword versus CP Aegis 0. Aegis means shield. Sword versus shield. I keep running into this problem every time that we talk about Sword in reviews. I just take it for granted, right? That Sword opposes CP0. It's like been suggested, but I don't think outright stated. So it's this kind of conversation between them that we need to understand the various factions, what they stand for, what their goals are, what they've been doing, all these things. So I wouldn't really say that I buy their fight, but the things that are going to be revealed during it, I'm so hyped for. And Cypherpool's powers, that's another thing. Also, a question that I've seen that I took for granted, but apparently others don't, is I just presume that the dude that's fighting now is just the strongest. But a lot of people seem to think Rob Lucci is the strongest member of CP0. I'm curious as to what you guys think. I hadn't really thought about it too much. I just figured it'd be kind of lame if this hyped up group, the strongest member of it is somebody that we've already fought. But also, I think that you shouldn't underestimate the pictures that Apu took in this chapter. He says himself, what a scoop, maybe I'll sell this story to Morgans. Doesn't seem important, right? CP0 is going to defeat Apu. But do you think Apu's going to die? This is another way in which news about what CP0 is doing in Onigashima, Kaido, creating weapons, instigating wars, this is another way in which the information can leak. And Oda's very, very sly here. I approximately put it at a 0% chance that Apu dies. And I very much doubt that his camera is going to be destroyed. Or someone else could pick it up. But anyway, that's kind of my interpretation for why this particular fight with these characters is happening. You have sword and shield, exposition, things of that nature, and then Apu is a wild card. But don't underestimate this line. The leader of CP0 said, X-Drake, I hope you didn't assume that your true allegiance would remain a secret to CP0. And X-Drake says, if you already know, I'm dying to hear your excuse for being here. And he says, we're just handling pest control. I'm like trying to make sense of this. If you guys remember before, it was big news, for X-Drake at least. He told Kobe this when he saw CP0 arrive in Wano. That was something that was noteworthy. Of course, he thought at the time that they didn't suspect that he was a member of the Marines or Sword. But now we see CP0 sort of casually arrive. Now, of course, they didn't intend to encounter X-Drake. I don't think they were going after Robin, but it appears at this point that CP0 just doesn't care. That they expect that pretty much everyone is going to die. But still, knowing that who X-Drake is, what he's been doing to some extent, he doesn't seem surprised. Why haven't they already killed him? Why would they even allow the possibility of being discovered? That's interesting to me. As I said, I'm trying to make sense of it. Or on the flip side, right, they never intended to deal with Orochi and Kaido directly. The only reason that is happening is because Doflamingo was defeated. So they may not have had a lot of time to sort of prepare, and now they're just forced into this situation. Because earlier in Wano, it's not like they were parading around, right? They were trying to meet Orochi in secret, as it appeared to me. But anyway, the next part of the chapter focused on King and Zoro, and Oda clearly understands dinosaurs better than pretty much anybody. Zoro's obviously fought a lot already at this point in time. He went all out against Kaido, was pretty much defeated, was given a drug in order to continue fighting, and he's not making any gains on King at all. We even see he says, I don't think I can win. Which in my opinion is a significant moment, because I don't think I've ever seen Zoro ever say that. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. His attacks are literally doing nothing to King. And then he hears some music and Enma gets real mad. So again, I do think that Zoro is actually going to defeat King. His race is presented as an important detail to help Zoro. In a vacuum, that makes sense to me, right? Like, know thy enemy. But as far as this fight is actually concerned, does that suggest that there's some sort of trick about King that once you understand that, then you can hurt him? I really don't know. But I think that this chapter pretty well establishes something we said a long time ago that I don't know how, if everyone believed it, but Enma is a power-up. Like, 100%, this arc specifically, I think Enma is a power-up. To me, Enma is Zoro's version of, like, Nightmare Luffy in Thriller Bark. An arc-specific power-up. There was a line, a subtle throwaway line that a lot of people either ignored or didn't find to be significant early on, where basically like swords inherit the will of their fallen users. And when samurai pick the swords up in the middle of battle, they get stronger. This is a continuation of Odin's fight, therefore Odin's sword still possesses Odin's will, and is empowering it even further than it would be at any other time. Plus, let's be honest, Enma just seems broken to begin with. It's obviously been a long time since we've come back to Enma in the story, but we speculated earlier there's a lot of tiny details which suggest that the sword has a pretty strong will of its own. It might have been influencing Zoro even, to some extent, to compel him to go attack Kaido, and I think that has to do with Odin's will. So if this is true or not, we are probably about to find out, because Zoro hears a shamisen of Komurasaki. It's established in a flashback that was the thing that she often did, and Enma is reacting to it. Enma, which possibly possesses Odin's spirit or will, so it would make sense for the sword to react to that noise. I also often talk about how music has a sort of power in the world of One Piece. Music moves the soul. A bit of soul or spirit inside the sword also makes sense. Or maybe it's something different entirely. But I really wonder what all this means and how it'll play out. Again, I think that pretty much the standard assumption should be that, okay, Enma's about to go ham, and then Zoro's just gonna one-shot King, right? I think that was kind of my first knee-jerk reaction. Kind of see other people thinking the same thing. I think it might end up being a little bit crazier than that, though. But we'll obviously find out. What's really intriguing about this situation to me is that it doesn't appear as though Zoro's whittling down King's HP at all. At all. And he doesn't have much strength left either. So it's literally gotta be a one-shot if Zoro's going to win, right? I mean, that's how it makes sense to me. I mean, you're not winning, so you gotta go all out on one strike, and it's gotta auto-defeat King, which is so different, I feel like, from most of Zoro's fights, if not all of them. I guess it would be most similar to Daz Bones in Alabasta, where Zoro really couldn't do anything until he figured something out. But still, that Daz Bone fight was more satisfying because it improved Zoro's swordsmanship abilities in the process. So it wasn't just like, oh, I defeated my opponent with a thing that's given to me here in the arc. It's like, no, I'm now stronger for the future. Well, Enma seems very sword and arc specific, so if he just one-shots him with Enma, I don't think it would be as satisfying. So if he doesn't defeat King, doesn't one-shot him, what then? The thought of this definitely excites me a little bit, but I don't want to set my expectations too high. But I don't want you guys to forget that Enma has some downsides, right? Like, it can literally kill you. And that really hasn't come up at all for Zoro. We haven't seen the ramifications of that, but we could, if Zoro needed another reason to be on death's door at the conclusion of this fight. But anyway, guys, the end of this chapter was just bizarre. I loved Hiyori's entrance, but it was so weird. It was so weird. Afterwards, I'm just left like, okay, hold on. What? She said, "Likewise, my lord, all I want is for us to spend the rest of our lives together." Is this like, she planning on dying? Also, she's so calm and composed, she's just playing her instrument right next to Orochi, assuming that he's gonna come there. The whole moment was kind of extra. And it has been confirmed, right? We saw the person in the shadows that helped the Scabbards early in the arc. Was that Hiyori or not? As she appears here, it almost puts that thought in doubt. The vibes I got from her in this chapter, I know that this is similar to Pudding in Whole Cake Island, but I hope she has some kind of split personality, right? Like, Komurasaki and Hiyori are actually different people personality-wise, that her mindset is just totally different. I'm excited to see what happens, but the confusion is real. But yeah, I really don't want to speculate too much. Obviously, I think Orochi is going to be defeated again. He has one head left, so it would make sense for Hiyori to deal the final blow if that's going to happen. It may not. I'm also curious about Dendro, right? Komurasaki Dendro is kind of a pair. Dendro, where is he gone? Nobody knows. But I'm just kind of sitting here waiting for Oda to blow me away. And remember, guys, Oda always drops a bomb around New Year's. The New Year's chapter is always good. So, yeah. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much what I had to say about this chapter. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think. Whether you know something from the chapter that I might have missed, just share your thoughts. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike the video if you disliked the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.